Call the meeting to order. My name is Suzanne Perley, and I will be chairing the meeting tonight as our chairman. It had to be out of town. We do have a 4-member board tonight, and we just have one issue with Ori Gibbs, who was not here at the last meeting. By law, she is able to sit on the Big Island hearing if she so chooses, but she wanted to make a disclaimer.
I just want to let the applicant know that I worked for the law firm that originally represented them in 2014, and I'm perfectly willing to hear the application. I think I can decide on its merits. The city agrees. The firm I work for agrees. I just want the applicant to be aware that I am an employee of a former attorney of theirs, and if the applicant is not happy or doesn't want me to hear the application for any reason, then they can present their objection and I won't hear it. Otherwise, I'll sit on it.
Does the applicant have any issue with, or Mrs. Gibbs sitting on the case?
No, we don't have any problem.
Okay, great,
Thank you.
Okay, just, all right, I'll call the meeting's been called to order. We have acceptance of the minutes from the previous meeting.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Roland Mayhew.
Here.
Ori Gibbs.
Here.
Mike Foot.
Here.
Suzanne Perley. And Steve Bogert is absent. We have Dean Trefethen here, the planning director. And I'm Robert Mora, and I will be taking the minutes.
Okay, so with that, we'll move right along. We have the minutes from the October 16th meeting.
I move we accept the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion
As
to
written.
accept
I
them.
second that.
Second, all in favor? Okay. A few points from the agenda. We have several applicants who have been asked to be moved to the December meeting. So if you are here for the application on 423 South Main Street, they will be moved. They have been moved to the December meeting. If you are here for 21 Morris Ave application, they have been moved to the December meeting. If you are here for 145 Daisy Gardner Road, they have been moved to the December meeting. With that said, we know there are a lot of people here tonight, and we're going to have it's going to take a while to get through the Big Island issue. We have one other applicant who has a case that should go fairly quickly, and we would like permission to move the agenda around, or I guess I'm going to suggest that we move the agenda around and allow the applicant from 12 Charles Street to come forward and present his case first. Is the applicant present? Okay, would you like to just tell us a little bit about what you're proposing tonight?
Yes. Just gonna give copies to the neighbor, that's all. Copies here, you can look at it. Okay, I live at 12 Charles Street, and I put up 85 feet of fence, so I can have my neighbor not to snow blow the snow on my property and against my house. And I have examples that I just showed you. I did cut down 8 feet of the fence. And how the houses are built, it's in an alley, and the other 8 feet, that if you have to cut it down, it wouldn't matter if it's 2 feet or foot. My house and her house are in the way. And at 37 Bay Street, his fence is 6 feet high, and there's no complaints. And at 108 in 1010 Water Street, their houses are like mine and my neighbors. They're rather in an alley. And his fence is up for privacy. The rest of my fence is for privacy because they're on Water Street, their street, or their driveway is in an alley, and they just have their fence for more privacy. And then on the tavern parking lot right across the street from the post office, that's example, like I'm saying, of my house and my neighbor's property. If you cut down the fence, it still wouldn't make a difference of what size, because on the tavern parking lot, the building, when you make a left-hand turn, there's a brick building that you gotta creep out to make a left-hand turn. So what are you gonna do, cut down the whole building just so you make a left turn? So and before I did cut down the 4 foot, I was gonna do it automatically so she could have easier. And I gave her an extra 8 to 10 inches more so she can get in and out of her car. And and I use high quality wood, and I got #1 class wood from Borough Grove, 4x4, nice straight. And the people that lived there before, they had a fence there, and they had a fence out back by the railroad tracks, and they took it with them when they moved. So, and
How high was the fence that was there before, that was taken down?
I don't have no clue. I don't know.
We'll get to you later.
And just looking over my notes for a minute here. Oh, and also, the fence will give me privacy for my bedroom, for the light shining in my bedroom. And I did cut down 8 feet down to 4 feet. And the rest of the fence is 6 feet. And like, if you see the pictures, if it's down to 2 feet or a foot, the fence
Can I see, are those the
wouldn't
same
matter.
pictures?
The next
Yeah,
to
they
same-
are. That's the same
Yeah.
package.
And that's just like the tree down on Union Avenue, right by Pizza Hut, the old oak tree. People been fighting, cut it down, say people shave it. I ask you to, just let me keep my fence how it is. If you give me my privacy, and it's good for my dog, and that's, I'll see what they have to say, and I'll come back and say what else,
Okay, when was this fence installed?
It was maybe September, no, well, a little bit of September, maybe around September, I say,
So just,
this year,
just a couple of months ago, so
Yeah,
it's a new
just-
fence.
yes.
You didn't bring a picture of the fence?
They took pictures of it, I have a picture on my phone.
No, that's okay, fine. I'm
Yeah,
fine.
but no, I didn't know.
Okay. All right, does anybody have any questions of him right now?
Not right now.
Okay. All right, why don't you have a seat? I'm going to open it up to the public and see if anybody wants to speak for or against this application. Is there anybody here that would like to speak for or against this application? Please step forward and give us your name and your address.
My name is Virginia Edwards, and I live at 8 Charles Street. And I do have some pictures, which, do I give some?
So
to
you're the
board?
neighbor?
I live next door,
Okay.
yes. I have brought extras, do I have to give them to anybody, or?
If you're going to share them with us, they become part of the record.
Yep. Virginia Edwards. Mr. Sanborn's reasons for the fence don't really make sense to me. I don't know how light can get into his house because his blinds and curtains are closed 24/7, 365 days a year. Nevertheless, the only light of mine that can reflect into his house is on my porch. And that's higher than the fence is because it's in the ceiling of the porch. When we retire at night, that light gets shut off. There's no light coming from any windows in my house because all my blinds are closed at night. The first pictures there that you're looking at, the first two, when I'm pulling out of my driveway, that's what I see when I'm trying to look left to Fair Street. The fence is right in my face. Regarding my headlights going into his house, I don't understand how that can happen because I always back into my driveway because I just find it easier to pull out rather than back out. For the past few winters, Mr. Sanborn has allowed us to blow snow from our yard onto his property because we don't have any property there really. It's just the driveway and then his property. Each winter, my son did ask for permission and Mr. Sanborn gave him permission. When snow blowing, my son kept the snow blower pointing down so the snow was blowing on the ground and nothing was flying up in the air. If snow and rocks were hitting Mr. Sanborn's house, I would think that there would be damage to the vinyl siding on his house. My primary concern is with the first section of the fence that abuts the sidewalk. When I'm pulling out of my driveway, I can't see over this section, even though it's only 4 feet high. I stand barely 5 feet 1 inch tall. Sitting in a car, I cannot see over a 4-foot stockade fence. The only way I'm going to be able to see down Fair Street to see if there are vehicles or pedestrians coming is if that section is removed. And then I do have some pictures here which show how my view is obstructed. When I look out my window, I see the fence.
So your objection to the fence is the first
That
section?
first section that abuts the sidewalk, I can't see getting out of my driveway.
You
I
have
mean, I
no
just-
objection to the rest of the fence?
No. Nope.
So it's 6 feet of fence that you object to?
An 8-foot section that is 4 feet high.
It's 4 feet high, that
Oh.
Meets code.
meets code,
First one.
yeah.
That first, the very first pictures that I had with the fence like that, that's what I see when I look out of my driver's window. And there's another picture here, you can see my mirror here, here's the end of the fence. I see the fence, I don't see the road, I don't see who's coming, I just cross my fingers and hope for the best. It's an accident waiting to happen, it really is.
What is the speed limit on the road?
30,
On Bay Street?
I think so. I mean,
What?
Oh, well, do you know I would presume so.
What?
That's- Well, people go faster than that down Charles Street, and it's not Bay Street, it's Charles Street.
Charles Street?
Yeah.
Bay Street goes on to Charles Street.
And I just assume it's 30, that's.
I mean, Charles Street goes on to Bay Street, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah. And people fly down that street because they're trying to avoid the traffic on Port Street that leads over to Fair.
Okay, all right.
Tractor trailers come down that street.
Does anybody else have any questions for her?
I do. Can you see past the bush headed to the south there? You can see past that, that's not a problem.
Because I'm turning right. I've never had a problem with that.
I went down there today, and that first section caught my eye too, because it comes all the way out
It
almost
goes
to the road.
right to the sidewalk,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay,
And I can't see. I just, but hey,
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against this application? Please step forward, give us your name and address.
My name is Mike Little, and I live at 16 Charles Street. And the only thing I can attest to is that the fence that was originally there was taken by an owner 3 owners ago, and not the most recent owner, or even the past 3 most recent owners. And my only objection is that I am in a butter, and I wasn't even notified of this hearing. And I thought that all the abutters were supposed to be notified, and if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I heard about it secondhand. That's all I have.
Yeah, you do, but.
What's your name?
Mike Little?
Oh.
It looks like there's somebody between.
Your name isn't on the abutter list.
Do you need
I
to see
do
the
about his
pictures?
property. 16 Charles Street, he's 18. I've recently had a lot merger that was done for my driveway. So
So
it
do
may
you
show a
own-
separate tax lot
Do
on
you,
older
do you own
records.
the 34, the strip that says 34?
That's the tax lot number?
Yeah, it's 16, looks like it's tax lot 35.
Yes, 34.
And then there's a strip, a small strip that says tax lot 34.
That's correct. That
That's
was
yours?
merged. Yeah, that was merged with the city of Laconia this past summer.
Oh, well, it could be just an issue with records in the assessor's office. So anyway, well, you are here, so. So are you, do you have an issue with the fence?
The only issue I have, and I'm actually here for Cindy, is that the fence may be 4 feet at the very top of the driveway, and you may have noticed this, but because it slopes, it's actually higher than 4 feet at the back end of that 8-foot section. And that's the only thing I would bring to your attention. Because
Okay.
the whole, everything slopes there.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against this application? Please step forward.
No, the fence is 4 feet, and Mr. Little's not a butter. He's not a butter. His name's not on the list. So he's just here because, my neighbor's little having conflicts and she has, by the pictures she has is, enough area to get out. And the fence at 37 Bay Street, that was been up since I've had my house, and nobody complained about that fence. Maybe the neighbor don't complain. And I just asked to keep it as it is, please, because it doesn't, you know, she has room to get in and out, because I have issues with her, because she called my granddaughter a little bitch.
Okay,
I
we
haven't
can't,
said anything.
okay,
Okay.
stop, that's enough.
So,
So that's it,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, we're going to end this, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, does anybody else want to speak for or against this application? Please step forward, no? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for discussion. A question for staff, is that fence allowed right to the street line like that?
Couple of things about fences. We do not require building permits for fences. Fences can be right on the property line. However, we do have a few regulations for fences. One is their maximum height is 6 feet, and within the front setback, it's 4 feet. So that's the issue that we have with part of this fence. The section of the fence that is that is 4 feet high, basically up to the front property line, meets code. The next section in partially is within the setback, so that should technically be 4 feet. I don't think that's the issue, but
Right,
technically that would be the case. And usually when it comes to fences, it is brought to our attention by a neighbor or whatever that there's an issue with the fence, because like I said, we don't require building permits for fences.
so the fence is legal, but it obstructs the neighbor's view getting in and out of her driveway, so it causes a bit of a hazard to the neighbor.
There is a sidewalk.
Yes, I
So it's
noticed that
not,
on the
it's
pictures.
not, it's not
So she
like
can
the
pull out
car is
further.
100%, coming out from the fence and into the street.
Yeah.
But
All right.
I'm not sure the width of the sidewalk, and obviously, the driver's position in most cars is probably further than 3 or 4 feet back. That would be the width of the sidewalk.
Seems to me she has quite a ways that she can pull out.
I can't believe that that's a 30-mile-an-hour posted street.
Well, that's,
I'm gonna call that right out.
it's not an issue right now, so we got to deal with the issue on the
I don't think you
table.
could drive 30 miles an hour down that street.
I don't think so.
I mean,
Pretty narrow, and it's,
I guess my feeling is that if that section of the fence is legal, within code, we can't
Well-
force him to.
I think the thing that bothered me about the fence was it comes into the sidewalk. And if
Comes
a
up
person's
to-
walking down the sidewalk, they're gonna walk into the
Up
road to
to,
walk
it
down the
comes up
fence.
to the sidewalk. It doesn't go into the
Certainly no
sidewalk.
closer than either of the bushes to the north
went
or
into
the
the
south
sidewalk.
of that.
That doesn't look like it's into the sidewalk to me. It looks like it stops at the edge of the lawn.
Certainly the bushes to the north and south of that,
Extend out further than that
further
fence
than
does.
that. Or at least intrude upon the sidewalk more.
Now, this is the picture that bothers me.
But that stops before the sidewalk.
But that's,
Stops,
she still has all the
Yes,
sidewalk
yeah.
to come out to.
yeah.
But it's still far enough out that it causes this car to have to be out into the sidewalk to be able to see what traffic is coming.
But the problem is that it's legal.
It's legal.
It's legal. He's within ordinance the way that fence is built right now.
Is it?
It's
May I
4
ask-
feet high along the property line.
Can I ask
And
a point of
and
discussion?
in the setback, and there's a small, it sounds like there's a small amount of it, a certain section of it, that actually is 6 feet within the setback, and that's what he would need the variance for.
Have we called this back from public meeting? Is this a discussion within
Yes,
ourselves?
it's-
You know, if we're gonna get down to splitting hairs and being a nice neighbor, then maybe you could drop the front part of the fence, even though it's legal, even though that views are not protected, even though there's no base in it, and then leave the rest of it and call it a done deal.
Do we have the right to do that?
You would be granting the variance with the condition that the front section be made.
So you'd be granting the variance on the second set of the second
Right.
8 feet of fence?
Correct.
With the condition that he remove how many feet of the first section?
Or just shorten it so that
Just
she
cut
can,
it, cut it down another,
if you went to the level.
Oh, okay, all
If you
right.
brought the points to the level of
say
where
the car
that.
window even,
If you brought it down a
this
foot,
line is.
yeah, brought it down.
Sure, and
To
if
the
you look at
level.
it this side, if you look at it built from this side, it should be fairly easy.
Yeah, just bring it down to that, the level
Hmm.
underneath that,
Sure, you may
To
have
that
to do
board.
another stringer.
yeah.
how do people feel about that?
Yeah, if he
And
cuts the fence back, I'll go with it. Otherwise, I'm not, because it may be legal, but it's not just.
Gives him the fence, gives him the variance.
Okay, so we agree
And
that
gives her
he could get the,
access.
yeah, we would agree to allow the fence if he were to take the
If-
section that is now 4 feet and bring it down to,
3? Is that enough to see over a car?
I would think so. I mean, if you come down, she doesn't need it. When you look at this photo,
Probably 2.
it doesn't need to come down.
nothing.
Yeah, you still need
I think
something
it just
as
needs,
well.
I think it just needs that section enough so that when she pulls out, she can see without going all the way out.
Even if you just cut the points off
Yeah,
with the saber saw.
you just bring it down.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just brought it down,
Yep.
drop that and bring it down, cut the
Yep,
point.
that's fair.
Mike, would you like to make that motion?
Can I look at someone's papers? I'm a little bit off today.
That's fine. And there are the photos.
Okay, so in reference to application number 202-017-0031, 12 Charles Street for Gordon Sanborn. This is a request or a variance because of height of fence. In the front part of this fence, it's well within code and properly done, though there can be some point of contention on the second line of fence. I think for the good of the neighborhood here and to make it better for those around, I say we accept his proposal to keep the height of his front fence from the second section on down, though it would be best for the neighborhood if we were able to shorten the front fence to, I don't know what this line is, I don't, whatever the height of the points is to the base of this
The first
stringer.
crossbar.
The
Yep,
first
the
crossbar. And recognizing that views are not protected. But for the safety of the community, I think this is reasonable. I mean, for the spirit of the ordinances observed, substantial justice is done, and everybody gives a little here. The value of the surrounding properties are not diminished, and little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would, well, what's a hardship here? It's this is a give and take. So hardship being that you'd have to take down the extra part of the fence, but we give to our neighbors here. And do I have anything else for that? So the condition, and the condition being is the variance is accepted for the second part of the fence onward with making the front part shorter to the level of.
To the first 4 or 6 feet, whatever is down to the first crossbar. Okay, we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Right.
Okay. Thank you. All right, our next hearing is for Big Island. We had we left off with a public hearing that was open, so I'm going to, I guess I just reopen the hearing.
Yes,
Yes.
continue the public hearing.
I'm going to continue the public hearing and ask for, if anybody from the public would like to come forward and speak for or against this application, please step forward. And tell us your name, address.
Good evening. My name's Tom No of 8 Prescott Ave. It's a property known as Pixie Island behind Christmas Island. I wasn't here for the last hearing, but I was able to watch most of the commentary online, and people made impassioned pleas on both sides of the issue, and all of those should be well respected, of course. I feel I'm in a bit of a unique position to speak on this issue, having had family that has been on Paugus Bay since the late 1950s, behind Christmas Island originally, when it was all seasonal camps, and throughout the years, you know, I feel very fortunate to be back on Paugus Bay recently, and but over the years, you know, there's been a tremendous sea change and the way things look all along Paugus Bay, and ultimately it's for the best. It's exposed more people to the beauties and the joys of lake living, and I feel as though Scott Everett's intentions are noble and just, and he's only looking to extend the joys that a lot of us have been able to experience over the years to more people and to underprivileged people. And ultimately, I don't see, you know, there's been such a tremendous impact over the last 30 years in general, and it seems to have absorbed. Everybody's doing well, and I think the beauties and joys of the lake should be extended to the people that Scott looks to expose those to. So ultimately, I'm just here to speak on behalf of the project, and I feel it's a noble and just endeavor, and I'd like to see it come to its fruition. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
Good evening. William Van Bennekom. I live in Guilford, and I want to speak on behalf of Scott Everett if I could. But I want to make sure, though, I don't live in the city itself, if I can speak.
No.
I understand. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Sean Feaster, and my wife Wendy and I own a home on Paugus Bay. And we're here tonight to support the girls' camp. We think it's very beneficial for the community, and especially for the girls that would not otherwise have this experience to enjoy the lake. We've listened to many concerns, including the noise issue. And living on the lake, and everyone knows how busy the lake is in the summer, there's a lot of noise, including cigarette boats, the fireworks from Margate, the fireworks from private docks. There's a beach on Southdown that gets busy. And I think one of the biggest noises might be the seaplane that comes and lands. So for us to say that the noise issue is, to us, a little disingenuous. But I am a lifelong friend of Scott Everett, and I know his motives are pure, and he just wants to give back to the community that he grew up in. So I'm sure he'd be extremely conscientious in every aspect. And the most important thing is to create an atmosphere that would be a lifelong memory for the girls that attend the school.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against this application?
Good evening. My name's Mark Ashley. I live at 11 Sonia Drive. It's the last house on the end of Massachusetts Ave on Paugus Bay. Don't know Scott Everett at all and think it's a wonderful project. Very supportive of it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Proctor. I live at 56 Parkers Park Road. I'm a direct abutter. So I made a little map here. I don't know if I could issue it, give you guys copies of it, or...
Sure.
And I'm Linda Proctor. I also live at 56 Paugus Park Road. I'm a butter of Big Island, directly across from it.
Thank you.
Yep, go. Thank you. That's good, yep.
The stuff I marked in yellow, I believe is stuff that Scott Everett has purchased recently. I'm just a little concerned about the houses he's buying and the land he's purchased at the end of Van Buren. I'm pretty sure he purchased this area, and it could easily be used as a parking lot someday to make access right across the street if it turns into a conference center. Most of these houses to the left of Van Buren, I think, are all people who don't want the zoning changed, along with myself and my wife, Linda. So this is really a concern to us, because we're worried about the safety of the kids right in front of our house there, because there isn't a lot of room there and the boats fly by. We also wouldn't like to see it changed to a no-wake, because our children and our grandkids will be water skiing and tubing around that area. I don't understand why we're here again, because last time we were here, the same thing happened. And I think the application was pulled because it was obvious it wasn't going to get passed. And I don't know what the difference is now. It's basically the same thing. I'm worried about not Scott Everett, but the future, who ends up buying that some other time after the zoning's been changed. I think it's a good idea to have a girls' camp, but that this particular island is not zoned for it, and it's very small. I think Scott Everett, there's other ways he could take care of this. He could sponsor girls to another camp on the island, or try to look for something that's zoned for it, where he wouldn't have to go through this type of stuff. And if he's so concerned, it does appear to me that he's concerned about everybody on the left side of Van Buren. I don't know of anybody that wants it that lives down that area. All the abutters don't want it. So I'm here just to ask that it be kept residential. And, it's not, to me, it's too small to be zoned for a conference center. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Masco, 82 Paugus Park, direct abutter from the island. I look out onto it every day. My concerns are, got a few. One is the loons concern. We've talked about that extensively last time. The loon's nest, we look out at it every morning. The loons come up around our area, Lake Shore. Now in the fall, we have other waterfowl that is coming into to this area. So the concern is, and I think we had someone from the Loon Center talk about how close a nest could be to where there would be human activity, and there's a concern with that. Concern on the, as far as safety and emergency, I understand there's only, right now, in the proposal, one pontoon boat. So what if there's a engine issue or something goes wrong with the pontoon boat and there's an emergency on the island? How is that going to be taken care of? I know inside Poggers Bay there is only one fireboat. Looks like a relatively small Boston Whaler type center console. But there would be a number of minutes that it would take before that boat could get out there. Could it carry everything that was needed from a paramedic to take care of anyone that was seriously injured on the island? From a camp perspective, my daughters, both of them, went to Camp Nokomis on Bear Island. And Camp Nokomis is about, I think it's 40 acres I saw for that camp. It's an all-girls camp. They have docks off to the side, out of the way. When my daughters went to camp there, they did everything from kayaking to sailing to canoeing, swimming. But if you look at how that camp is set up, there's a couple of natural boundaries, and they have some markers to keep boats away. And it's just because of the natural lake surface and rocks and danger. So they get pretty much out of the way. But it's also a wider area. It's basically the Broads. And boats are not being funneled down to get between the mainland and an island to get around there. So if we have a number of kids that are out on kayaks, canoes, paddle boards, sailboats in that area, I see a lot of issues and concerns. We have boats that are anywhere between, I think the longest boat I've seen going through there, which is a cigarette boat, or I'll call it a go fast boat, is probably in the somewhere between 40, 50 feet long. And they are sometimes 2, 3, 4 broad. Sometimes they're going in opposite direction. You have Southdown Marina right there, the boat club, where there's a lot of traffic in and out of that area, plus the mooring balls that are out there. So it's not just it's a 1,500 feet between the mainland and the island. You have swim areas, you have mooring areas, you have boats on a summer afternoon, especially Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, because remember, camp is also during July 4th. You're going to have issues and concerns. Another area that I have a question on is, why was the noise study done during the day, a summer day? Summer day, yeah. We got planes flying, we got trains coming by, we got boats. Saturday, I almost need a megaphone to be able to talk in my own backyard. Understood. But it's Saturday. We know that. Most of our neighbors aren't going to really be upset about that. What we're concerned about is when it gets cold, how much better noise travels across that lake, how much better you can hear everything. So I understand that there's a girls' camp that's being proposed, but what's happening outside of that week, or we'll call it an 8 or 10 week period of mid-June through August? There's supposedly, it's a conference center. Who's going to rent it? What are their hours going to be? Between, say, May through mid-June and August through, say, the lake doesn't freeze till December. What's going to go on there? How much noise is going to be made? I work, I want to be in bed by 10 o'clock Sunday night through Thursday night. So if everyone's going to be shut down by 8, 9 o'clock, probably don't have much of a concern. You know, Friday, Saturdays, do what the Margate does. They shut down right after their fireworks up to 10 o'clock. Why wasn't there a noise study done at night? That's the concern we have. How much are we going to be staying up till 11, 12, 1 o'clock because we're hearing a pretty good party, music, fireworks, whatever. You know, this time of the year, which we understand, you know, July 4th, we live up here. We know there's gonna be fireworks. But right now, you go out on my backyard, it's dead quiet. Is someone gonna have a conference in which they're bringing in, you know, it's a rewards conference, and all of a sudden, they have 60 people in which they have a band out there, and they're giving out all kinds of things, and they're having a great time. Because you and I know, we go on vacation, we don't sit there and say, I'm gonna stay up on Friday and Saturday night, but Sunday through Thursday, I'm going to bed at 9 o'clock. No, every night's gonna be up late. The other idea is, the other concern I had was the buying of the property on the street. So Scott had just bought another piece of property all the way down, we'll call it Pogus Park North. He has another piece of property on Pogus Park South, plus the unit in which he and his brother share as a condo, along with another piece of property on the corner, the south side of Van Buren, and right along the DOT railroad tracks. So we don't really know what's going on. Unfortunately, we have assumptions. We look at the new piece of property bought in Pogus Park North as being directly across from the island. So the concern is, from an emergency point of view, is that where he's going to go instead of going down to Pogus Bay Marina? Because just from a safety point of view, an ambulance would be, and boat would be easy to go across there. Is that gonna be where, when they have conference centers, you know, the Coors Light, Bud Light truck's gonna back up, put the kegs on the boat and go across, because it's easier and less expensive? So we have a concern on that. The other concern we have is down at Pogus Bay Marina. I know I've talked to some folks that live in that area who did not know about the arrangement that was being made. But there will be a number of cars that are going to be parked down in that marina if that marina is being used for being able to, as a waypoint to go out to the island. And what's the impact to those folks there? I know myself, I belong to Pogus Bay Marina. You know, if it's tough, when I go there in the summer, it's tough for parking. It's very tight. So is there going to be now additional parking on the roads? I'll finish up with this last one here. As far as I know, Laconia Police do not have a boat on Pogus Bay. And the concern I have is, if this does pass, we have a noise issue on the island. It's 12 a.m., it's 1 a.m., and we need to call. Now, on the mainland, I can call, a cruiser will go down, they can talk with the owners or whoever's holding the party or whoever's holding the celebration and get them to quiet down. How does that happen when you're on an island? Marine Patrol only takes care of those things, those actions on the water, not on the mainland. Okay? Again, Bill Masco, 82 Pogus Park. Thank you.
My name is Sarah Kerouac. I own properties on 24 Pogus Park and also 18, so I consider myself a double abutter. I spoke at the last meeting, so I hope, is it okay for me to speak? Okay. One of my concerns is that right behind me, behind my house, is the sewer pumping station. And it's not unusual in the summer, often, for me to call, and I know the gentleman who lives in Lakeport who attends to that pumping station, and he's wonderful when I smell odors from that pumping station, which is quite a few times in the summer. He's explained to me that it's often caused by heavy weekends and with a lot of people in Southdown, just because of maybe 4th of July or whatever. Now I'm concerned we add 60 more people from Big Island using that same sewer pumping station. Am I going to get more or place more calls to him to come over and take care of this odor. So I just want to make sure that I'll be guaranteed that I don't have to do that if this passes. Thank you.
Arthur Riddle, 110 Pogus Park. I really can't add anything to my neighbors of what they said in opposition to this. I agree with all of them. The only thing I think we should really look at is the plan itself. I did a little research. I think 26% of the districts in New Hampshire call for a zoning of 2 to 3 acres for just one residential home. To fit what type of camp is this really going to be? I mean, I'll probably get more exercise walking up to get my meal than these kids are going to get on this island. It's a great idea. No one can go against wanting to do something for the youth. One of my neighbors suggested, we've had a health club downtown that was vacant for a while. That would have been a great purchase for something of that. To use for the youth of the community or whatever, but just the project in and of itself, not much of it makes sense. I mean, if you sit and think about it rationally, it's too small. The safety concerns are huge, and I mean, if you go to that camp, are you going to want to go back to that camp? Because I can see you going from your little hut to grab a snack to the beach, and I really don't know what else you can do other than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Karen Heffler, and I own 8 Pogus Park, which is right next to the Beach Club, directly across from Big Island. I'm probably, between the Beach Club and I, we're probably the closest people to Big Island. Let's call a spade a spade. The only reason Mr. Scott Everett is applying for this special exemption for a conference center is because the zoning board doesn't allow a camp in a residential zoned area. What he wants is a camp for girls. I don't think he's really interested in a conference center. I applaud him, however. I think it's a wonderful idea to be able to, and he sounds like he's going in the right direction, to do something for underprivileged kids. I question why it's girls and not boys, or both, but that's another story. The problem is that the venue is all wrong. Big Island is 2.2 acres of rock. There's rock all around the island, and there's rock on the island. Now, a camp, to me, needs to be a safe environment for kids to be able to spend time outside. Maybe these underprivileged kids live in the city, and they're going to spend some time outside on the lake. But a camp needs room to run. They need room to go for hikes. They need a lovely beach. They need a safe place to be out on boats. They need a place to play softball and have games. There's no room on that island. By the time he's done putting all those buildings on there, counting that much of the perimeter is wetlands and rock, there's no room for the kids to do much of anything. It's just the wrong place. Now, we all know that Mr. Scott Everett owns a good deal of property in Laconia, seems to be purchasing more on a regular basis. He owns at least 3 houses that I know of on Pogus Park. He just bought the one right next to me. And I'm sure that he's got real estate people on his speed dial. So perhaps it would be wiser for him to use these real estate people and find a spot where he could have a real camp, where there would be room for these kids to play, where they would be safe to be out in the water instead of in the middle of Pogus Bay, which we all know is a zoo in the summertime. Perhaps he could find a spot somewhere else to make his dream come true. Or, I have an even better idea. How about gifting the island to a conservation trust and getting a tax refund?
Good evening. My name is Christian Svinland. I'm a resident of Laconia. I live at 97 Ashley Drive. Although I'm not in a butter, I've spent most of my life on the lake. I'm agreeing with my friend Tom No, who opened it up with, we have this wonderful piece of property that we all been sharing. And I think Scott Everett's plan to share that with some more underprivileged youth, whether it's our area or other parts of the state, is a great idea, and I fully support that.
My name's Mike Delavecchia. I live on the Little Island in Paugus Bay, and I rent a house on Paugus Park Road in the winter. It's a lovely neighborhood. My wife and I truly love being there in the summer and the winter. You've heard everybody come up and be concerned about safety issues. You know, South Down Shores has 2 beaches. Everybody lives on, well, not, there's several houses on Paugus Park Road that have swim platforms out in the water. If they were so concerned, that stuff wouldn't be there. You can have a swimming area safely on that big island where boats will not venture near. I respect everybody's opinion and worries that perhaps he's going to build a parking lot in the middle of the neighborhood to access the island. That's not going to happen because it's against the rules. You can't just be careful what you ask for. You heard Scott's brother last month say that he had $2 million invested in that island. If you don't get the girls' camp, you're going to get some 36-foot tall condos on that land. And no, sir, believe me, that something's going to happen on that island.
Excuse me, would you address the
I'm
board,
sorry.
please?
Well, in the background. Something's going to happen there. And believe me, the girls' camp is the best thing that could happen to that island. Let's think about the good that's going to happen. You're going to get probably 200 girls a summer come there, spend a week, and leave. They will grow up and come back here for vacations. They might buy property here, settle down here.
Okay, can we please
Underprivileged
have order?
people still prosper. Some of them get a break. They go to college, study hard, and become successful. I remember I went to New Hampshire when I was a little girl. They come back, buy property, go vacation here. It's good for Laconia. Laconia doesn't have a lot of, let's say, prestige like Wolfboro and Meredith have. The Big Island camp would be prestigious. It will open up employment for people. It's nothing but good. Believe me, the girls' camp would be nothing but good. You're concerned about noise. Paugus Park gets a little loud. You know, there's a lot of boat traffic. Margate makes some noise. I'm closer to the Margate than anybody on Paugus Park, and you know, it's not horrible. We enjoy listening to the bands, the fireworks we love. It's over. If there's residential houses on Big Island, you never know what you're going to get. And I just caution everybody, please, be careful what you are against, because the alternative could be worse.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against this application?
Good evening. My name is Travis Youssef. I own the property at 34 Paugus Park. That is directly across the island, as many others are, because we are so tight on that road. But for many of the reasons that my neighbors have brought up, I am opposed to all of them as well. Not to the reasons, but I am opposed to the island becoming this camp or conference center. And Sally, thank you for bringing up the point about the sewage plant, which is also directly across from my property as well. And we do get that odor coming in. So an increase in usage to that plant, I am afraid that it's going to cause more of that consistent odor coming on, especially the weekends, but more into the week as well. I think the point here is that Mr. Everett is trying to commercialize our neighborhood, and that island is very much part of our neighborhood. It's so close to that street, and for them to say that noise is not going to be an issue is quite ridiculous, to be quite honest with you. I have looked up some other camps within the Lakes region, in and around the Lakes region, if you will. Here's a list. There's 21 girls' camps around the area. Nearly a shortage. Here's a list of all the girls' and boys' camps in and around the Lakes region. They're extensive. This is a 2.2 acre property, and I've looked just a couple of these girls' camps up. Camp Bernadette, 50 acres. Camp Robindale, 75 acres. Camp Kettleford, 30 acres. Camp Nokomis, 40 acres. Some of these are on Lake Winnipesaukee, one on Bear Island, another in Moulton Borough, I believe. These camps are outfitted with numerous basketball courts, fields. They have water trampolines. Some of them accommodate horse riding trails, climbing walls. One has a wood shop, tennis courts, I think I already mentioned. This island can't even put up a volleyball court. It's so small, and with the wetlands around it, like was mentioned before, I don't know what type of activities would possibly go on at this camp, which leaves probably many water activities, water trampolines, kayaking, sailboating, with a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit of boats going by. I can't imagine it being a very safe environment for these girls. So I am quite opposed to this, and I hope that you all can consider not moving this past this point. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak for or against this application?
I'm Marnie Schultz, and I live at 5 Andover Place in Laconia. I think the idea of girls' camps and whatever are wonderful, but I spent a good part of my early life teaching swimming and water safety. And I think that is one of the most dangerous, horrendous places to ever think of putting small children in the water, whether it's on boats, kayaks, or just wading. There's no way you can wade around that island. But that is my biggest issue with the whole idea, is the safety issue for these children. Because if they're coming from areas where they have never had any experience in the water, it's terrible. It's just so dangerous. The swells and the wakes from these boats are just horrendous, and they start early in the morning and they go until late at night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ben Gamache, and I'm an owner at 50 Pockus Park Road, and I've been living there for 20 years. I've been a real estate investor and real estate agent for 40 years, and it is my expert opinion that when you mix commercial real estate with residential, the commercial will stay the way it is, but all the residential values will go down. Take, for an example, just across the way, Route 3 going down to Wares Beach. You got all commercial activity there mixed in with residential condos. So you got the Margate doing their commercial thing, you got the Chinese restaurant, and you now have like One Guilford Place. There's 55 condos at One Guilford Place. Beautiful. Overlooking the water, you have the views. But those condos, because they're all mixed in with the commercial, you can't get more than 100 grand for a beautiful condo with beautiful views on Lake Winnipesaukee. It's amazing to me. So, and it happens when you go down to Greenview and all the others. The values are almost 75% less than you're dealing with Poggers Park Road, and their values for those homes. You go to Guilford, where there's no commercial area, those values are up. By passing this law, or by passing this island, you will definitely be allowing the values of Poggers Park Road to go down and affect all the residential owners. So please give that some real consideration, how important it is about the values of homes, the values of Laconia, where you are and where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against this application?
Good evening. My name is William Gannon. I'm an attorney from Manchester, New Hampshire. I represent Mr. Gamache, Mr. Malahan, and through them, many of the neighbors that have spoken at this hearing. I will not try to repeat, excuse me for a moment. I will not repeat what the neighbors have testified to, but I did want to put this proposal in the context of your zoning ordinance. By way of history, the girls' camp proposal was presented some time ago. Apparently did not have enough traction because frankly it's not a permitted use in the zoning district. The next effort was to rezone the property commercial. That failed, and now we're back here again. The only difference between this proposal and the earlier proposal is the addition of the words conference center. And if the board recalls the application, picture how many times in that application you see the word camp, campground, camper, tent, and all of the words that under your zoning ordinance describe camp and campground, which is not permitted even by way of a special exception. At the last hearing, there seemed to me to be a little bit of sleight of hand going on. I think the applicant indicated the project had been discussed with the staff, and the staff expressed the view that it was more like a conference center than a campground, and therefore you should look at it as a conference center. Well, I took the time and trouble to meet with staff, and I think that was a misunderstanding of the staff position. My understanding is the applicant was told, if you're going to label it a conference center, then it really has to be a conference center. And the words, it has to quack like a conference center, may have been said. If the board recalls the application, there is a lot of justification for a girls' camp. And perhaps at the outset, I should tell the board, I've been married to the same wife for 46 years. I have 3 daughters, 3 granddaughters. I'm all in favor of girls. But the sound study pertained to a girls' camp. The activities described are described in relation to a girls' camp. There are arts and crafts. There are swimming areas. There are tents. What the board knows about the conference center is next door to nothing. We know that, I think we know from the last hearing, that it's going to be open maybe a little bit before the start of the girls' camp season and maybe a little bit after. We don't know what activities are going to be there. We don't know what the hours of operation are going to be. Really, you don't know anything about it. And the sort of second sleight of hand is a conference center is permitted by special exception, and that sort of morphed into it's permitted as a matter of right, which is not true. This board needs to be able to find the factors outlined in the ordinance, but in many ways they come down to it's appropriate for the site and it won't hurt the neighborhood. Well, consider what they're proposing. At the last hearing, the sort of alternative was, well, there can be 7 single-family residences on that site. Or, as you heard tonight, condominiums 35 feet high. But the topography and the soil of the island, according to staff, permits 3, maybe 4 at the outside. So if you're considering intensity of use in a residential neighborhood, if they built 3 single-family homes, probably 15 people, 2 parents, 3 children, they're proposing 60 people. If they build 4, then you're talking 20 people versus 60 people. You're talking a family that, as people testified, they work, they go to bed at 10 o'clock. Week is reasonably, peaceful and quiet. Weekend, sure, everybody goes out and water skis. Not campers. Campers go on vacation. I had 3 daughters. I know they stay up late. I know they talk a lot. I know they play boom boxes. And we all know that. There's not going to be a 35-foot high condominium on that island. Just isn't going to happen. So this is a project that really is a camp and a campground. And the applicant, to his credit, really doesn't make any real bones about that. That's what he believes in. That's what he wants. As many people have said, it is a laudable goal. Doesn't make it right for this location, but it's a good goal. So, it's either we're dealing with sort of a, not sure what the right term is. Either we're dealing with an application that adopts and uses the term conference center to sort of get the camel's nose under the tent, but it's really a girls' camp, which is really prohibited, or it's the applicant using the girls' camp to get the nose of a larger conference center in under the tent. Either way, this board not only, first, this board does not have to adopt the idea, well, if they label it a conference center, it doesn't matter if it's a campground. We have to treat it like a conference center. No, you can see it for what it really is. And you should see it for what it really is. You also do not have to approve a campground and cannot approve a campground because it's adjunct to a conference center, even a real conference center. So, I urge the board to consider the application very seriously. As I learned from my daughters, I mean this in the nicest possible way, but the fact that Mr. Everett is a wonderful man with a wonderful mission does not change the law in any way. I think my clients are all supportive of girls and girls' camps, just not this proposal in this location. And I thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against this application? Please step forward at this time.
Good evening, how are you? I'm Eric Fowler, I live at 38 Crane Circle. So with the exception of you, we could probably argue who's closer to the island. I'm here because yeah, I see a story of, and I don't know Mr. Everett, but I see a story of a local kid who grew up in this area, and I didn't grow up in this area, I grew up in Virginia, lucky to be here for about 5 years now, who wants to come back and give back to his community. And I just encourage everybody not to discourage him from doing that. And so, again, being probably the person that would be most impacted, or at least one of them, I am in favor of the camp as it's designed, and I hope others agree with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Joshua Youssef. I live at 3 Linwood Road. My parents live at 30 Paugus Park. My brother lives right next door to them. And heard a lot of good and interesting points. I would argue the best points are made in opposition. But a point that I haven't heard is that this undertaking stands to be the largest commercial island development project in the history of Laconia. Unless somebody can come up with a project that has occurred on an island within the boundaries of the city of Laconia and the history of Laconia, I think that this would probably be the largest commercial development in Laconia. And if you see the number of people who are actually impacted by this proposal, the vast majority, the overwhelming vast majority of them are opposed to it because they stand to be directly impacted by it. So just in terms of the practical side of things here, the practical side is if he were giving back to his community, he'd be giving back to the people who actually have a stake in the community. Those people are the ones that are paying the tax bill, that have invested in this community. They have dollars and lives and children and educations betting on Laconia. They're already betting on it. That's giving back at the expense of the community to do this type of a project in the face of all of this opposition is giving back not to the community, but at the expense of the community, giving back to untold, unidentified people a promise into the future that possibly, and I'm sure there's a probability that some of these girls will come back and maybe buy property here and maybe their lives would be impacted. But the reality is we're discussing a promise to an unidentified group of people into the future and weighing that against the people who already have a stake in the community that are all betting, that are all saying, I've bet on this town already and this isn't going to work for me. So just as a practical matter, to ignore the cries of all of these investors, let's call them what they are, they've already invested their lives and their families, to ignore these cries in favor of a commercial development that should not take place inside of this zoning district would be a complete abandonment of these people and of the spirit of and the intent of zoning in general. We're going for a special exception here. The exception is basically pleading to depart from the rules, the well-established historical rules. So again, unless I'm mistaken, this is a very serious and historic undertaking for the city of Laconia to embark on a commercial project on one of its very few and largest islands. And the opposition really needs to be given the majority of the consideration here because they're the people who stand to lose the most. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against this application? Please step forward.
get a, you know, that's the applicant.
Right, so do we close it to the public and ask her if they want to come back up, or do they let them speak now?
During the public hearing.
Okay, go ahead and speak.
Thank you. I'm Rosie Dennett, planning consultant for the applicant. We do have a number of speakers that would like to respond to some of these issues. We've got 2 hearings worth of comments, and we'd like to address them all. We certainly do respect and appreciate their comments, and we take them seriously. And Scott did want to respond after the last hearing, provide them an opportunity to speak with us directly, to answer questions, and to try to address some of these issues. He came back. They had a neighborhood meeting at his home. He hosted a meeting on November 4th. Unfortunately, no one from the opposition did come. We had
notice of any meeting.
we had
Okay, thank you. Please.
We distributed over 35 invitations along up and down Paugus Park Road, and notified the Southdown residents as well. So we didn't. I'm not
Okay,
lying.
please, out of respect for the person that is speaking.
Anyway, so we'd like to take the opportunity tonight to address the issues that they've raised, because we've not been able to successfully meet with them. So we do appreciate this opportunity to be able to respond to their comments. There has been a lot of...
Excuse me, before you begin, could you bring the mic just a little more up? Sure.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to go through a few of the comments that were just made tonight so that we can address some of these right away. And like I said, we've got other speakers that have some other comments to make. First of all, the underlying zoning, as you know, will not change. The residential zoning will stay intact. And this is a special exception, so if Scott were to sell this property, any future user would have to be able to operate the property in accordance with either the residential zoning or the special exception that was approved. So it's not a commercial zoning. It's not a rezoning of the property to commercial use. One of the reasons that the noise study concentrated on the girls' camp portion of the use is because that's primarily the use that will be outdoors some. The conference center portion where we have the facility for the nonprofit groups, up to 60 people at a time that will be using the building, that's primarily an indoor use. And so that's why the noise impacts, we looked at trying to come up with a comparison of a use that would be worst case scenario to try to get a good handle on what those noise impacts could be. And keep in perspective, we're talking about a girls' camp 6 weeks out of the year. It's only 6 weeks that we have the girls' camps there. The rest of the time, we're talking spring and fall for the conference center use for the local nonprofit groups. Again, that's an indoor use. We anticipated at site plan review stage that we would be placing a lot of conditions on the proposal. We're certainly willing to discuss with you any conditions, any of these commitments that we've made on the record, but things like quiet hours for the girls. This is a huge difference between a use like this and a specific program for this educational camp is totally different than a commercial campground. It's just not even in the same realm. It's not uncommon to have conference centers and camps together. Quite often, conference centers are for the adults and the adult lodging, and the camps are for the kids. In this case, we don't have adult lodging. We just have the girls during the summer months. One of the comments about all of the other camps, we've also looked at the other camps that are available. The big difference between this camp and The other camps in the area this is again for only 40 girls, and it's an educational camp. It's not a recreational camp. If you go to like the YMCA camp that the one speaker mentioned, that is a use that's what those kids are going for, is the recreational activities. We understand that. That's not what we can't offer all of those things. That's not the emphasis of this facility. That's why Scott has purchased a bus to be able to take the girls to some of these educational programs in the area that he wants to have them participate in. So it's a program-oriented use. It's not the same as these large camps. So yes, they have a lot bigger properties, but they have a lot more kids at a time. The YMCA camp has 150 girls at a time. There's another camp on Squam Lake that has up to 400 at a time. So those are much larger camps. Of course, they need larger properties. We're not doing basketball courts and tennis courts for these girls. That's not this type of camp. Again, with respect to the conference center portion, there has been a desire expressed to Scott to have a facility for some of the nonprofits that can afford places like Margate, to have retreats for the small nonprofits in the community. So again, he's trying to give back to the community. So that is the point with that use. With respect to the emergency people, as we indicated in the very beginning, clearly we will work with the emergency groups on what we need to do, what they need. If they need equipment, if they need additional equipment, I'm sure Scott would consider doing what he could to help provide additional equipment. We've even talked about providing the facilities for training for the Marine Patrol, things like that. So this facility will become something that the public can use. These nonprofit groups can use it for retreats, training centers, those kinds of things. Someone mentioned the deliveries. The agreement is with the Paugus Bay Marina. All the deliveries will be made from the marina. And the whole point of that exercise was to show, to provide with this application a means of access to this island that would not impact the immediate neighborhood at all. No traffic is going to come through this neighborhood. That's very unusual. You know that. You see zoning proposals all the time, planning proposals. It's very rare to have a project where you can say you're not generating any traffic in the immediate surrounding neighborhood. That's one advantage of having an island use like this. I think at this point I'm going to let our attorney talk about the actual definition of conference center.
Good evening. I'm John Arnold. I'm an attorney at Hinckley Island down in Manchester. I represent the applicant. With your permission, I'd just like to hand out to you a written submittal that I have. It's essentially a summary of my remarks that I'm about to deliver to you, but I'd like it to be part of the written record. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. So, excuse me. There's been some discussion and some confusion over whether this use is a conference center or whether it's a summer camp, and I'm hoping to try and bring some clarity, at least with respect to our position on that issue. I don't think that there's any question that renting these facilities for conferences, for retreats, for meetings in the spring and fall seasons as proposed is a conference center. I think that's what everybody thinks of as a conference center. I don't think there's really any debate about that. The question that's been raised by some is whether the summer camp component and that programming is a permissible component of the conference center. Our answer to that question is yes, it's permissible for two reasons. The first reason is that the Laconia definition of a conference center under your zoning ordinance is so broad that it captures the summer camp programming. Your ordinance defines a conference center as, I'm just going to read this out of the ordinance, a facility which is used for the provision of services for meetings, conferences, exhibition space, or seminars, and further may provide accommodations for sleeping, food preparation and eating, recreation, entertainment, resource facilities, and meeting rooms. Now, this definition may be a little bit different than what most people envision in their heads when they think of a conference center. But it's the definition that you have in your ordinance, and it's the definition that you've got to look at and which governs the use in this case. An important point in reviewing this definition is that it doesn't need to be a precise fit with the use. In your ordinance, you recognize that you can only name so many specific use categories, and that there may be uses that don't fit precisely into each one of those named categories. In those cases, your ordinance instructs that you need to determine whether a proposed use is similar enough, and that's the language that you use in your ordinance, whether the use is similar enough to a certain use category to fall within it. Here, the closest use to our proposal is a conference center. That's why our application is for a conference center. The use is not a campground, which has been suggested. The definition of that in the ordinance involves a number of individual campsites rented out as temporary living quarters to a bunch of different individuals. That's not what we're doing here. It's not a hotel or a bed and breakfast providing transient lodging to the general public. Whether we're talking about the conference center programming or the summer camp programming, the use represents a group of people coming together for a common purpose, which involves education, instruction, recreation, and entertainment. So the overall proposal is certainly similar enough, again, using the words in your ordinance, similar enough to the use category to qualify as a conference center. Now, I mentioned we had two explanations. That's the first explanation why we believe this use is properly classified as a conference center. The second justification is that if the camp program were not similar enough to fit within the conference center use category, the conference center would still be allowed as an accessory use to the conference center. Did I say conference center or summer camp? The summer camp would be an accessory use to the conference center. You don't even need to think about this argument if you agree that the summer camp program falls under the definition of a conference center. But if you don't agree with that, then please consider this. Your ordinance defines an accessory use as, and I'm quoting out of the ordinance, any use customarily incidental, related, and clearly subordinate to a principal use established on the same lot or premises. If a use is accessory to a permitted use, the accessory use is also permitted. Under this analysis, the conference center is the principal use. It'll operate during 2 seasons, spring and fall, and the summer camp will only operate for one, about 6 weeks during the summer. The conference center will host up to 60 people at a time, and the summer camp will have a maximum of 40 campers. And even though the project is not financially driven, it's expected that the conference center will generate more revenue than the summer camp because it operates during more of the year. And as mentioned before, there's a number of scholarships and financial aid packages that are expected to be offered to the campers. In addition, summer camps are frequently associated with conference centers. We've compiled a short list of examples which you have information on in your packets. The Sargent Conference Center is located in Hancock, New Hampshire. That provides outdoor education and conference space, but also operates a summer camp program. The Alton Bay Christian Conference Center is in Alton Bay, New Hampshire. That offers a faith-based retreat and conference center, and also provides summer camp programs for kids and families during the summer months. The Harris Center in Greenfield, New Hampshire, that's an Episcopal Conference Center, offers summer camp programming for kids. Camp Spofford in Spofford, New Hampshire, offers Christian retreats year-round and provides summer camp programs for kids and families. The World Fellowship Center in Conway, New Hampshire, that's another conference center with facilities offering group and private retreats and also provide summer camp programming for kids. And the Geneva Point Center, that's in Maltonborough, and perhaps that's most like our proposal. It's a conference center on Lake Winnipesaukee, specifically geared towards serving nonprofits for a conference center, and operates a summer camp program as well. So I mention these just as examples because I think that when a lot of people think of conference centers, you may be thinking of the Radisson down in Manchester or the Grapponi Center down in Concord. And the reality is that there are a lot of conference centers out there that operate with a summer camp component to them in this immediate area and the greater area in New Hampshire. And so for the second reason, to the extent you do not believe that a summer camp program falls within the definition of a conference center, our position is that the summer camp program is an accessory use to the conference center and is therefore permitted, assuming that you grant the special exception for the conference center. Finally, I'd like to briefly address some comments that the applicant is trying to hide the ball or somehow misleading the public or the board. This couldn't be further from the truth. The decision to move forward with the application that's before you tonight was the result of several meetings with city staff. And although Dean hasn't made any zoning determination in this case, the result of those meetings was that we believed that the most appropriate application for what we're proposing is a special exception application for a conference center, which is before you tonight. There's no intent to hide the summer camp component. It's offered 6 weeks a year during the summer months as a part of that program. But we believed in good faith that this was the best approach and the most appropriate approach to ask for the relief that we need for this project. If there are concerns about how the use may change in the future, the board's empowered to impose whatever conditions it deems appropriate to prevent that. And the reality is that even if the present owner or some future owner wanted to change the use of the property at some point in the future, it would have to come back to this board and or the planning board for a public review and approval process. So I don't believe that those concerns are well-grounded. If you have any questions about that use analysis, I'm happy to answer them. If you don't, I know that our noise expert is here, Eric Reuter, who has some responses to some of the comments that were made on his noise study.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Eric Reuter, Reuter Associates in Portsmouth. I'm a consultant in acoustics and noise control and specialize in environmental noise impact. And I was unable to be at the last meeting, but I watched the video. I've heard all of the public comment. I've read all of the correspondence that's been submitted. And it's clear that there are some points that I should make to clarify things that are in the report. There's no new report. It's the same one that Rosie, I believe, presented at the last meeting, which you have. And I wanted to explain a little bit of the process for doing the study and also address specifically some of the concerns that have been brought up. I was asked to look at the potential for impacts on the residences along the shoreline on Paugus Bay, on the western shoreline facing the island, closest to the island. And as Rosie indicated, the approach was to look at what we believe to be the worst case scenario, the loudest sources of outdoor noise that would occur. And for this proposal, that would be the kids playing outside in the summer camp mode, in the 6-week summer camp mode, as that's the only part of this, the only component of this that has a significant outdoor use. There will be no amplified sound on this island as part of either of these uses, unlike the Margate and other places where they have DJs that come in and use loudspeakers and microphones and amplified music. So the sound is purely from human voices during outdoor activities associated with the summer camp use. So to look at an impact, a noise impact where there are no criteria that impose numerical limits on sound levels, we always look at the existing situation, existing scenario, and then compare that to the impacts or the contributions from these proposed sources. And in this case, the proposed sources being kids playing. I went and gathered data at another camp from a group of kids playing. It was not a camp on an island, it's a different situation, but we can mathematically calculate the difference between measuring over a grassy field and over water. And we can scale the number of voices that are contributing and use data in different situations. And we do this for all kinds of sound sources when we need to predict what the impacts are going to be, whether it's voices or a railroad or mechanical equipment. We have to measure in other environments and then mathematically translate that to the environment at hand. So I took the data measured at another camp of kids playing, scaled it from 100 to 50 campers, although that difference is negligible. It's only a 3 decibel difference, which is barely audible. And then built a three-dimensional computer model with the island and the shoreline and the water, and all of those conditions of sound propagation are accounted for. The difference between going over water and going over land. So the concerns about the perception of amplification over water are incorporated into the calculations. And my finding was that the contribution at the closest point on the shoreline would be about 30 decibels A-weighted, 30 dBA, from 50 kids playing and along the waterfront of the island. The other half of the study, of course, is to gather data at the area of potential impact. There was a monitor placed for several days along the shoreline, about 80 feet from the shoreline at 38 Crane Court. I want to clarify that the monitor was in direct view of the lake. There were no intervening structures or foliage or anything. It's only grass from the microphone to the water. This is a good representative location. And the study, the monitor ran overnight. I'm not sure. There have been a few comments about the sound study only encompassing daytime use or daytime hours. On the page 4 of the report, which you have, there is a plot of a time history from Wednesday, July 12th at noon until Sunday, July 16th at midnight, and it's continuous data. If you have it in front of you, I'll briefly explain the 3 traces on there. There are essentially 3 lines that represent 3 different statistical descriptors for the same data. So in other words, the sound monitor measures data over the course of the hour, and then it can calculate some statistics at the end of the hour, which are reported. And the 3 that I've reported here are the L90, the 90th percentile sound level, and that represents the continuous level in the environment. That's what we use for background or ambient sound level. The LEQ, which is orange if you have it in color, with the middle line, is the average, energy average over the course of an hour. And then the L1, which is the highest line, the green one, is the 1 percentile sound levels. And that sort of represents things that happen on a regular basis but are short in duration. So things like a speedboat pass by in this particular scenario, or possibly one big impact here is the train horn. You can see the zigzags. Those are from the train horn going by. Most important, though, on this plot and for this project is that L90, the continuous noise level. If you look at the trace, this is the lowest of the traces if you don't have it in color. The levels, the continuous sound level doesn't get below 30 dBA, which is the contribution of the camp, until at least 10 p.m. And on weekends, on Saturday night, it was after midnight. So the if we take the background sound level and take the contribution, we're at the background level. During all of those hours, 10 p.m., midnight, the average sound level is much higher. So my conclusion in the report is that this use will be inaudible under most circumstances, unless there's a very unusual situation after midnight. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I think I've covered most of the points in the public comment. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Questions? No? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rosie Dennett again. Just wanted to address the loon nesting site. A lot of comments were made more last time than tonight, but I still felt that I needed to respond to those comments. One point of clarification that does need to be made is that the loons live on the water, not on the land. I know that, I'm sure you're aware, that they only go on the land for the nesting season. And in the case of the nesting pair that we have on the island, that's primarily the month of June. And loon behavior is well documented. And the loons do leave the nest immediately following the birth of the chicks. So even with the current boat activity on Paugus Bay that the neighbors have described as being extensive, the loons have adapted well, and you have many loons that spend every summer on the water there, and that will continue. Regarding the nest site, we have expressed previously and again tonight that we are willing to commit to having further details at the site plan review stage, but would include fencing off the buffer area around the nesting site along that eastern shoreline. We also can establish a nest monitoring system. We want to work with the Loon Preservation Center. We also would like to construct a nest raft just off the shoreline in the rocky area, the rock outcropping where the boats don't go currently now because of the rocks, just in case the loons prefer that location. And we would work with the Loon Preservation Center on designing those nests, that nest raft. If you go on the Loon Preservation Center's website, they have a lot of information about what I'm talking about. They have a lot of information about the nest rafts. And reading from their report, rafts have accounted for up to 90% of the chicks hatched on more developed lakes like Squam and Lake Winnipesaukee. So just to state that again, that up to 90% of the chicks hatched on those two lakes are on nest rafts. Also, one of the statistics that they list here, and this is, I'm just quoting from their report, 1 of every 4 loon chicks hatched in New Hampshire since 1975. So 1 out of every 4 hatched in the entire state has come from a nesting raft. So it's a viable option is my only point. And so we thought that we would certainly be willing to work with the Loon Preservation Center and construct one ahead of time, just in case for some reason the loons prefer to do that instead of being on the shoreline. So we just wanted to explain that as something that we would be willing to do. I almost hate to bring this up because of what people might say behind me, but it did seem to be the responsible thing to look at the alternative plan. As we've discussed before, we do now have public water and public sewer on this island, and currently the zoning allows for up to 10 homes on this site because of that zoning. Because of the setbacks, clearly we can't build 10 homes. And so initially we talked to staff about doing a clustered lot development, and that would require variance that we probably couldn't get. So we are looking at doing a traditional subdivision. So we went back, we did have, trying to be as as frank as possible, not trying to do any sleight of hand. I have an email from Dean that says that concurs with that cluster lot development would not be the way to go. And if we did a traditional subdivision, maybe 4 to 6 lots could be done. So we went back to the drawing board and we came up with a plan for 5 homes, not to use as a threat, but just to show a viable option that we are considering, and so that you can compare impacts. And so we do have that plan that we'd like to show you. And I think I'll just let the architect go ahead and describe that to you real quick.
You're going to show us a plan for 5 homes? I don't think that's relevant at all. It's not what's on the table tonight. No.
Okay.
It's not part of this conversation.
I think she's bringing it up in contradiction to what the...
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to respectfully request that you do not bring that before
Okay.
us tonight.
That's fine. I will state on the record that that's something that I first asked Dean if that was appropriate for us to bring it, and he said we could.
It's
So,
not the issue on the table tonight.
okay, fine.
Thank you, John Arnold again. Just a couple of points I wanted to wrap up with for our group. The first is that we're certainly sensitive to water safety issues, but I would say that Lake Winnipesaukee is a state-owned body of water. Boating safety and water safety is a question of state law and not a question for this board to govern. Our application goes through the special exception criteria in detail, but I'd like to briefly highlight a few points. Most of the special exception criteria are geared towards ensuring that the use is compatible with the area and minimizing impacts on the neighbors. And we believe our proposal does just that. When you think about the fact that this project is on an island over 1,500 feet away from the nearest property, it strikes you how minimal the impacts will really be compared to a conference center that could be proposed on residentially zoned land in the heart of a neighborhood. Several folks have expressed concerns about visual impacts and noise impacts. It's hard to imagine a conference center going into a residential zone where it would have lesser impacts than on an island. It's also meaningful to think about the alternative developments that could go on this island and have a much more significant impact on the abutting properties than what we're proposing. The example that Rosie was just mentioning is a traditional subdivision with 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 single-family homes. Each could be a year-round residence as opposed to a seasonal use that we're proposing. Each could have its own dock. Each would be free to invite family, friends, and other guests. The total number of the people on the island could easily meet or exceed what's being proposed with this project. And something like that could easily generate more traffic, more noise, more visual disturbance than our proposal, and would be subject to much less oversight and control than an organized and seasonal use. So I think that wraps it up for our group, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions at this time? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else from this group want to speak for or against this application? The hearing is still open.
Yes, Larry Rosenfield, 278 August Park Road. Listening to this the last few meetings, it just doesn't seem to be going too smooth at all. I mean, we have neighbors where it seems like most of the local neighbors are against it, and people who don't live in the immediate area are for it. I know Scott, and he, if he wants to do something like this, I think it's a great thing. But when you have a neighborhood that is completely against it, and people come up and stand in front of you and start, it's not a threat, but it almost seems like a threat of what it could be. If they did put a subdivision and the board did approve it, and if it's 4 or 5 houses, so be it. There'll be less impact. I'm concerned about the safety. I'm concerned about the safety of the girls or whatever is going to be there. That's my concern. There's a lot of good things that can come about, but those would be neighbors out there. Right now, they're talking about having 50 or 60 girls that could be swimming. And as the person who talked about teaching swimming said, it is a tough area. I own one of those boats that they call a speedboat. And I go through there, I watch what I'm doing, but it's very close on sides. And if someone goes beyond a swimming area and gets there, what could happen? We don't have a problem right now. I know the island, it's a beautiful island, but I think the board here, I respect that you will make the right decision and oppose this, this development. Thank you.
May I have a moment? Without trying to indulge in a legal debate, the argument made that this special that this proposed use would be less adverse or incompatible on the island than it would be in any other residential district really begs the question. Because by definition, your ordinance contemplates that a special exception is different. It's definitionally other than what is permitted by the ordinance. And the only question is the proposed use on this island compatible with this neighborhood? Now, whether you believe that they could build 3 single-family houses or 4 or even 5, that is probably 25 people versus 60 people. It's 3, 4, or 5 families versus 60 people at a conference. And we all know what people do at conferences, particularly reward conferences. So it would pretty quickly become Margate East or North, whichever direction it is. The argument that it's really a conference center has sort of shifted tonight. At the beginning of this session of the hearing, the conference center was almost a give back to local not-for-profits. And by the end of the hearing, we're hearing, well, it will produce more revenue than the girls' camp. Well, then it's really not a give back if it's being rented for revenue. The girls' camp, last time we were here, was going to run, I think, part of June, July, and all of August. Now it's 6 weeks. So the conference convention center is expanding. If this board elects to grant any applicant a special exception, then your ordinance requires the imposition of those conditions necessary to ensure compatibility with the neighborhood, at least as much as reasonably or practically possible. Now, I'd suggest, and I leave it to you, but I would suggest that you really don't know what conditions to impose, because you really don't know what the conference convention center operation is going to be about. You don't know when it's going to be. You don't know who's going to use it. You don't know what they're going to pay to use it. You don't know how many hours a day it's going to run. You really just don't know. But one condition would, might be, well, you're limited to 15 people, the equivalent of 3 residences. I heard all of the conference center, 60 people, all of the conference center activity is going to be indoors. That's why the sound study is okay. Well, I don't know how you're going to get 60 people all indoors, but, you have the plans, maybe that's possible. There's not going to be any amplified noise. No radios, no music of any kind or type, no yelling back and forth. Again, the applicant starts with the premise this is almost a use permitted of right. It isn't, and I don't think they've presented anything to you that addresses the compatibility issue. At best, I say on occasion, it won't be any worse, but not on all issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, like Mr. Arnold, I'm happy to take questions if you have it.
I'm good, thank you.
I thought you would be. Thank you.
Is there anybody here that has not spoken already that would like to speak? If not, I'm going to close the hearing. Yes, sir?
My name is Dick Rainville. I live at 70 Pogus Park Road. And when we were here for the last meeting, Scott's brother got up and made a statement that his brother had already spent approximately $2 million for his investment to do what he wanted to do. I live in Massachusetts, and most of the people that live on Pogus Park Road do. We all came to this area because we chose it because it was a beautiful place for all of us to want to be, to bring up our families, have our grandchildren, and do everything we want to do. But also, we have, taken, and between all of us, starting off down at the end where Larry Rosenfield was just up here, going down to the other end, and then going down, heading down into Southdown, and then going into Long Bay, the people, all of us, have probably spent tens of millions of dollars. So I think our money counts because we all tried to get here, to be here, to be able to do this and to have a nice area. The other thing that I find that happens is that if you're going to take and have an island, and I'm sure that everyone in this room has probably done it at some point, the children go off to a camp, and what do? You say, well, let's ride by and see. You're not going to go into camp, you're not going to do anything, but you just want a visual. Well, being Pogus Park Road, the way it is, it's set up, it's not quite a mile long, I don't believe, but if we start having traffic coming in and for people looking to see where their sister might be or someone trying to get to the conference center, wherever it is, going to be out there. And the other thing is that, just jumping ahead a little bit, when we were saying about the noise, one of the things that I learned about coming to the lake, because I never lived on a lake, and was when people say, you get out in a boat and you're 300 feet out, they say, watch out what you say. Because the voices come, you can sit there and you can listen to people. You're out in a boat, and sure enough, we sit out there, we're on, at our place, and you can hear the people if they stop. People are fishing out there, and it very clearly comes right across. It doesn't, it's not aggravating to us. And every Saturday night, we got a wedding going on during the good weather at the Margate, so, we're hearing Meatloaf over there, singing, and, we all know, the songs that he does, and it's good, it's nice. We can hear over by Patrick's Pub, we can hear that. It comes right across. You can hear all the words. So when people in this room are saying that when you put people on an island, that, certainly that, it is all going to be closer, and we are all going to hear it. And as far as the safety aspect of it, what everybody was saying, we've been here since '04, and we built a new house and everything. We took down the old one, put up another one, and so we sit out. So we're always out there. By 10 o'clock in the morning, it's like we live in the Boston area. You hit 128, you hit 95, 93, forget it, the traffic. Well, the same thing in which people have already pointed out. Once you get out onto the lake, whether it's going on both sides of the island, it gets the same thing. Now if you're going to start taking and having young ladies or whatever that are going to be out, even people in the conference center, trying to go over to get across to head over to Southdown, it's going to start to be a problem. It'll be dangerous. Other boats that are coming in from other parts of the lake to go over to the different marinas to fuel up or whatever, they're not aware of that there's going to be, some young kids that are going to be out in a kayak trying to get across. And as far as we have some large boats that are down, I don't know what they call it, but it's way down by Irwin Point. And some of them, they go by, they'll go up, they go in the big part of the lake, and they come back. And we'll be in bed at night, and you can hear the waves. And because, when they go by, the water, it's that much, which means if you were in a kayak or something, or if, another boat's going by at, the 45 miles per hour, which, they're entitled to do, it gets pretty rough out there, which means, because the kayakers, what they do when they come in from Southdown is they start out early in the morning because they know. And even if somebody wants to water ski, they know you better get out there at 7 o'clock in the morning, because if you're not out there, forget about it. There's going to be too much boat traffic. And so there's a lot of safety that's involved in it. And so that's pretty much all I have to say about it. But we're concerned because we've spent all the money to get here, like pretty much even the people that are for it, but they still spent money to get here. But some of them don't live near it, and we live across from it, and we look at it. It's a nice island. I've never dealt with loons before, but we certainly enjoy hearing them in the morning. It's a nice thing, you know, for everybody to enjoy. And, you know, it's like where they're going to go. So, you know, thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi, I'm Mike Demers, 74 Parkers Park Road. Pretty much my neighbors have pretty much said everything that I agree with them. I do not want it to happen on the island. My biggest concern is that they're proposing that they're going to be able to move their people from Parkers Park Marina out to the island. They have an agreement with them. Well, as we all know, agreements fail, all right? And what's going to happen when Parkers Park says, you know what, we can't handle your people coming anymore. We don't have the room, all right? We don't have the room for buses. We don't have all this room for you. Now, we do know that he's bought 3 pieces of property on our street, okay? What's going to be the next move? If Parkers Park Marina says we can't go there, he's going to go to the houses that he's bought right now to be able to get access to that island. Now, all of a sudden, he's going to have a commercial island, and he's going to have property on Parkers Park Road, which is all residential. Now we're going to have buses, we're going to have traffic coming down this road, so he can get access to that island. Now, if this whole thing falls through and he wants to put houses out there, he's already bought 3 pieces of property on Parkers Park Road. He needs 2 more, then he's going to be able to get access for those houses, to sell the houses with that land. That'll be their way to get onto the island. It's going to cause a lot of problems, traffic, and the impact on the street's going to be unbelievable. So I just like to bring that up to you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else here? Last chance. And I assume that the applicant has made their closing statement?
Correct.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to close the hearing now. It is officially closed. I will take no more public comment. I'm going to bring it back to the board for discussion. And I'll start off. I'm just going to briefly review a lot of the stuff that, that I've been thinking about that are my concerns. The current use, of course, is a seasonal camp. It's traditionally been a seasonal camp. It's a very special little island. I personally spend a lot of time on the lake. I have a boat that we keep down by Irwin's, and I make that trip past the island sometimes 4 times every weekend and sometimes during the week going out to Welch Island. So I'm very familiar with the site. The applicant applied for a variance in 2014 for a campground. It was classified by the planning director at that point, same application basically, as a campground, and it was classified that way. The applicant came here before the board. There was so much opposition to it, they pulled their application, so it was never voted on. It was withdrawn. Then the applicant went to the city of Laconia and asked the city council to change the island to commercial use, and the city council denied that request. In July of this year, the applicant applied to the planning board for a conditional use permit to install electrical pad for the existing structure, a single-family residence. Now, several times during that meeting, he was asked, the applicant's representative was asked, is this for the single-family residence? And was told yes, when in fact, it wasn't. This was, it was preparing for a commercial use. So I think that was, not a show of good faith, but that's just my opinion. Then here we are again in October of 2017, a request for now a special exception for the use of property as a conference center. Our responsibility as a board in looking at a special exception is to look at every parcel. They all have their own merits. Just because a conference center was allowed in the district, it has to be right for the site. And that's something that we really need to look at. As I said before, that island is so special. It's a tiny little island it's not like the other islands on Lake Winnipesaukee. They're all so much bigger, and they can handle a lot of issues. The amount of wetlands on the island that exist, and even in the plan that was presented to us, all the camps have to encroach on the wetlands, you know, so there is an impact on the wetlands because you can't build without going into the wetlands. The activities proposed, you know, they said that this is an educational camp, but it's still a girls' camp, and the way it's been described, and all these other camps have archery, volleyball, basketball, you know, I mean, badminton, all these things that you know, mean clear-cutting more land on the island. It means taking more trees down and having a bigger impact on the nature of this very special place. The travel, the path from Big Island to Paugus Bay Marina, and again, I do this all the time, and Mike will attest to it because he's very familiar with the area too. When you go down that, it's very easy to put a little red mark that says, I'm going to go to Paugus Bay Marina. Down at Paugus Bay Marina is 5 marinas: Lakeport Landing, Irwin Marine, Paugus Bay Marina, Cassis Point, Spinnaker Cove, probably 1,000 boats there, not even to talk about all the boats at Southtown. When you leave and go down there, to get to Paugus Bay Marina, you hit a no-wake zone, okay? So you have to slow down. Not only do you have to slow down there, you have to get by all the boat traffic going to the gas station, and then you have to go under a trestle, one boat at a time. On the weekends, when we try to get out of the marina, it's almost impossible, even to get out of our boathouse. And we have to wait, and you have to be very careful. So, you know, that's not as simple. That's another issue that, you know, not at me. The environment. The traditional use is a residential setting. It's a totally residential, in the middle of a totally residential area. It's this really special island, you know. Rescue efforts, they're just not available for city police and fire. The weather can be so changeable, and you have all these kids now in these little camps with no air conditioning. You have staff of up to 60 people staying overnight there. And even if these were going to be used for the conference center, adults don't stay in open camps without bathroom facilities. In order to these campers to use the bathroom, which they would at night, the island will have to be lit up all night. That's an issue that wasn't even brought up. But they're going to have lighting all the time, because how are these kids or adults going to find the bathrooms? Another issue that was brought up. So for those are my initial reasons why I cannot support this application. And I'm glad to take any other input.
Yes, I'm going to want to talk.
You brought up a lot of the things that I was jotting down myself while I was listening to people speak, pro and against. It's not, as was pointed out, this is just because it can be a special exception, it's not an automatic right. And as you said, we have to consider the neighborhood that it's in. And even if the girls' camp wasn't there as an accessory, alleged accessory use to a conference center, I feel that the island itself is an inappropriate location for a conference center. It just simply is not. It's a residential area in the middle of a very busy section of a busy lake. It's just not appropriate. I have to, everything you said was what I was scribbling the whole time.
Yes. A campground by special exception in an RS zone is not allowed. While I enjoyed the informative last several hours, I don't know why we were here, because I see campground, no. There is no, I've been told that there's a razor-thin activity we could have chosen, but I don't see anything other than the word no maybe somebody can argue with me about this. I know the attorney over here said that our interpretation of that campground area is loose, but I read what I read, and I generally understand what I read, and it keeps coming back to special exception, no.
It needs a variance.
And what's that?
It's variance. It needs a variance.
The variant is no. So on that alone, I can't vote on it. Now, we talk about variances and special exceptions and how they affect and what impact they have on the neighborhood. And every time we do a variance or a special exception, we go down a list and we talk about how it affects the neighborhood, and it affects the neighborhood adversely, then we don't pass it. Well, Pogus Park Road is a unique road in the city, and probably there's only one other road like it in the entire state, and that's Elm Street, Manchester. There is no outlet. Both ends are dead end. How are you going to, and in the last 30 years, that area of the city has changed dramatically. One person brought up tonight how he tore down his old house and built a new house. Well, most of the people on that street have done that, and they tore down small houses and built big houses. And if you look down there in the summertime and trying to see where they're parking, it's a mishmash. And now it's going to be even worse because the railroad isn't going to allow them to park on their side of the street. So I know this, Mr. Everett has bought 7 acres of land from the golf course, and ostensibly because he's going to put a parking lot in down there. Well, that just makes the area more congested. And so I can see no way that I could vote to establish either of these camps on that island. I'm sorry.
Okay, Mike, do you have any comments?
You know, one of the interesting things about serving on this board is there is no agenda. As people who serve on this board, there's no agenda. And so I really listen to this stuff with an open mind, and I really try and consider what this is. Some of the proposed uses put forth is wrapped in these altruistic intentions and stuff like that. But in my heart, when I look at this, I can't see that in perpetuity it'll be a girls' camp, which by ordinance is not allowed. And I really, the intensity of impact on what is really a little jewel out there is beyond what I can imagine. I mean, certainly when we have 60 people night after night after night, say goodbye to the lagoon. That's gone. And it will be a highly intensive use. I spend a lot of time on Pogus Bay. I spend a lot of time on these points up and down, in and out of the Southtown Boat Club, Cass Point, down into the lower end of it. And I recognize how much traffic goes through there. It's one thing when everybody goes home during the week, but when businesses are running, there's a lot of intense traffic throughout the course of a season there. I think that this use will change forever the quality of this rather tight riverine area. People like to say, oh, that's part of the lake. Well, when you look at the structure of it and the dam at the bottom, it's riverine.
It's a river. It's a river.
And so as you're coming down there, what people may or may not realize is the amount of secondary waves that come from boats moving down through. This adding to the traffic, adding to all of this, I just can't see it in the straight value of it. If I were a little girl and I wanted to hang out with my friends maybe I'd wish my dad had built me a jewel box where I could raise my family the next time around. And I think that's, you know, one of the considerations here. Really, I think it's a highly intensive use. I do think it will change it. I've driven down both sides and tried to imagine it, lights on, lights off. But truly, in a camp area, what Suzanne said is you're going to have lights on all night long. It becomes 24 hours. And they don't shut off. There is 24 hours all the way around. It just brings it into the middle of the lake. I think I'd have to vote against this proposal.
Okay, so it looks like we have 4 people that sort of are not in favor of the application. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion to deny. Is that all right? Okay. The use requested is authorized in the chapter. The use of the conference center, however, virtually, the use requested is a conference center, but virtually all the information provided by the applicant is for a girls' camp, which has been deemed previously as not a permitted use in the zone without a variance. Just because something, again, just because a use is proposed in the zoning ordinance, again, our job is to look at the site and say, is it right for the site? It doesn't mean it can happen. It has to meet all the criteria. The second criteria is the use will not create undue traffic congestion or impair pedestrian safety. The location is on an island, a very small island. Again, I reiterate that there are 5 marinas there. And in addition to Southdown. And there's an enormous amount of boat traffic and wake. And when you have a little beach on one side that's roped in, that's not a swimming experience for kids. Kids want to swim, they want to go somewhere, you know what I mean? And they're going to try to go somewhere. And then they refer in their application to boating on the other side with kayaks. Again, they would have to access that all through wetlands, and then you're putting a whole bunch of kayaks out in the lake, which is already a problem. There's, you know, for the boaters going in and out, it's really hard to see these kayakers most of the time. There's just a huge safety issue there. The third criteria is, will it overload any public utilities, drainage, or sewer systems, or any municipal services? The applicant has installed water and septic on the island. It is a city system, so that one, you know, will it overload the public utilities? I don't know. There has been a concern from a couple of homeowners that live near the where the sewer comes on land, that there is a problem there. And with flushing in the morning, 50 or 60 people going to the bathroom all within an hour when they get up, it's a big concern, even in a conference center. Everybody goes to the bathroom at the same time, so it's, you know, there's a lot of issues there. And if the system fails, it becomes a huge problem. The use will not create excessive use of municipal services, fire protection, schools, blah, blah, blah. So I disagree. It's impossible for the fire department and for the police to reach the island. They're not equipped to do that. My personal experience on the Welch Island, we were there this summer and somebody broke their leg. We had to stabilize that person, and it took, but by the time Marine Patrol was activated, and of course Guilford has professional fire and rescue, it was still a long time before they got there because they have to mobilize, and, you know. So it's, and you're talking about kids or even grown-ups at a conference center having a heart attack. You just don't throw them on the barge and bring them to shore. It doesn't work that way. So it creates a burden, I think, on our life safety services. Okay. E, any special provisions for the uses set forth in this chapter? There's nothing. The requested use will not create hazards to the health, safety, safety, or welfare of the general public. Again, the campground will encroach on wetlands and all the natural resources of the island. The use is just out of character for this lakeshore neighborhood made up of single-family homes historically, and that's the way I believe it should stay. The proposed again, the next criteria, is the proposed location appropriate for the requested use? The location is just not appropriate. There are several other, it's been girls' camps on the lake, and as was proposed, they're situated on much larger parcels of land. Even all the conference centers that were given to us by the attorney, they're all located on bigger parcels of land, and conference centers need breakout rooms, they need all kinds of facilities, food service, unbelievable. Getting garbage on and off the island, there's just so many issues. So I just believe the use is not appropriate for this small island. And lastly, is the use consistent with the spirit and intent of the chapter of the ordinance? I think it's inconsistent with the spirit and intent of the zoning law and the master plan. The traditional use is a single-family home, and the use is just not compatible with the neighborhood.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion about the motion? All in favor of the denial? Okay. The application is denied. If you will take your comments out into the hall, the board meeting is not over yet, so we would like to continue to meet. Could I ask you please to leave the room?
Talk about congestion. So we'll just continue on. Is there any, I guess we're actually done with applications. Is there any other business anybody wanted to discuss? I wanted to ask, I know that you had contacted Steve and I about an amendment that the state was doing to the zoning law, saying that each of the 5 criteria would have to be voted on individually. Has there been any activity on that?
The legislature voted to uphold the governor's veto, so there would be no change in the law. You'll continue doing business the way you have been.
Okay, well, that's good news.
That is good news.
I mean, it just makes things a little simpler, but, so that was, did that just happen?
I forget the exact date, but it was, yeah, it was about a month ago.
Okay.
It might have been the beginning of the month, as I think about it.
And then only other one little housekeeping item. I know that you're really great at sending the minutes out, really fast. And then I know you ask all of us to look at them, and I don't know how many people are submitting stuff to you, but me.
Good for you.
Okay. So I do look at them and I submit small corrections, and I noticed that tonight you made a point of saying here are the corrected minutes. So you did make some corrections.
I make all your corrections.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, mostly they're typos, because he does a really good job, so I'm not, I don't try to change anything except for but I just want to make sure when we make a motion to approve the minutes, that they're the minutes that were, I guess, amended or something, so I'll make a point of just saying that in the future, that I looked at them and, just to cover our bases, to know which minutes we're approving, because you send out minutes with the agenda, but they're not the ones that were finally, probably, by the time you get comments
After the
sometimes.
correction.
Because sometimes I don't get them to you right away.
You're approving the minutes that are included in your packet, which have
been corrected?
which have been corrected from
Well-
comments.
Yeah, I guess.
They are.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so I just want to make sure you're comfortable with that, and that I'm not doing anything that's
No, no,
upsetting you guys.
that's fine. No, no,
Oh,
that's
all
the
right.
reason
No,
we
I've
send them out.
always
and-
That's
assumed
why I
that-
sent 'em
I've
out.
always
assumed that the minutes that get sent out with the agenda are the ones that
Yeah, I've been.
are to be
After they've
voted.
been corrected,
Yeah.
those are,
Okay.
those are.
Okay, great. I just wanted to.
I just want to make sure that you had a copy of it this time. I felt like the importance of this.
Well, no,
Yeah,
and
I
it's
could
true
read
that
it.
everything that, we tried to,
Cross my T's out of my eyes.
well, if they decide to challenge this in court, which they might, the record is very important, so it's very important for your minutes to reflect, and I know I said a lot tonight, but I have written notes of everything I said, and so I can help you, with that, so, just so that there's no misunderstanding, so, all right.
I tell you, you did an excellent
You
job
did.
of conducting the meeting tonight.
Well, thank you, thank you. So is there any other business before the board? So motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you. And
Vote.
you're welcome to be vice chairman,
thank you.
So we are.
Isn't it funny how you think something like a fence isn't gonna be a big deal, and then it becomes a big deal?
Oh, neighborhoods.
There's a lot of love in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
That just really.
Always
that
a
shouldn't
story
have been
behind
such
the
a big